The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Sinkhole in Florida. You wake up in the middle of the night and your bedroom floor is giving way suddenly, falling really wall by wall this house into a sinkhole some 100 feet wide, 15 feet deep. And now one member of the family that lives in that modest home is trapped just as the sinkhole now expands even deeper into the ground.
The whole house, Josh, could collapse at any moment. Our reporter, Rob Munoz from our Tampa station, WFTS, is there in Brandon, Florida, and has the latest on the rescue effort. What can you tell us, Rob?
Well, Rob, let me tell you, this whole neighborhood is on edge. This family on edge. This house literally on edge. Like you said, this home could go at any moment. This family about to put themselves to bed around 11 o'clock last night when the floor collapsed beneath them. They heard what sounded like a loud car crash, they said, and before they knew it, it's just a black hole in a bedroom. And where that 36-year-old nephew used to be, no more, just a black hole, they said, and they heard him screaming for help. They tried helping him out. They tried digging for him as the floor was collapsing. They could not get to him in time. A Hillsborough County Sheriff's deputy was actually able to come into, he was the first person to respond here, ran in there, actually dug one of the family members out, pulled him out by the arm, but this 36-year-old family member they were not able to get to. They heard him screaming about a few minutes after that, and right now engineering firms are out here wondering if they can hear this man, if he's anywhere below that rubble. Robin?
What a scene. All right, Rob Munoz from our Tampa station, WFTS, thank you so very much. And Sam, people want to know, how does this happen?
It happens a lot more than we think, Robin, and a lot more places than we believe. And what's most frightening about this is how sudden and instant it is. The ground is fine and there until it's not. So you're looking at pictures from Florida right now, and then we'll give you the ABC virtual view to kind of describe what's going on under the ground. So everything looks tranquil and peaceful right on top of the surface, but when you pull out away from the surface and get a side view, and by the way, the most likely states are Florida, Texas, Alabama, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Pennsylvania. And here's why. Because under the surface, there'll be a deposit of earth that is probably a soluble rock like salt or gypsum or maybe even limestone. Water gets in here, it can't really get out, and all of this dissolves. Now, then that water leaches away, the ground collapses. You never know the ground is going to collapse because for a long time, that ground will stay perfectly in place and then all of a sudden just give away. It can be just a few feet, it can be hundreds of acres that go suddenly just like that. And that's why this thing is so frightening. The area is most likely, again, it can also happen in construction areas where water's been pumped out of the ground as well. Robin, Josh?
Certainly terrifying, and again, we'll have updates as news warrant.
We're here to talk about a situation that's evolving, continues to evolve. But first of all, let me say our hearts go out to the Bush family during this terrible time. They're dealing with a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns. And I'm going to help you try and understand what we saw last night, and then we'll answer any questions that you have. Essentially, shortly after 11 o'clock last night, the Bush family was in the house behind us. They heard a sound that they described as a car crash emanating from the bedroom in the back of the house. They rushed in. All they could see was part of a mattress sticking out of the hole. Essentially, the floor of that room had opened up. They could hear the nephew in the hole, but they could not see him. His brother jumped in to try and extricate him out. Could not see him. He had to be rescued by a Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office deputy who was first on the scene, who heroically went in and extricated him. Then our personnel, Hillsborough County Fire Rescue personnel, arrived on the scene, began to assess the situation, helped the other family members out of the house, secured the house, and began to attempt to rescue Mr. Bush. We placed some of our urban search and rescue equipment that's specialized for this type of emergency, some listening devices that are designed to hear essentially the sound a mouse would make walking across the floor. They're that sensitive. They did not detect any signs of life. They did insert some cameras into the hole as well to try and locate him. While this was going on, there continued to be collapses of the earth below the floor to the point where they eventually had to back out of the house, Our structural engineer that is on call with us arrived, Bracken Engineering. They began to assess the structural stability of the structure, determined that the whole floor where our personnel was undermined. Essentially, the home is undermined. Our personnel in the sheriff's office began to evacuate the surrounding homes to try and assure that this did not become a bigger emergency than it already was. Our crews have continued in their efforts to try and locate Mr. Bush. We have brought in additional sophisticated equipment this morning to try and help us determine the structure's stability, what our efforts can be to try and locate him safely without endangering more personnel. As I said, this is a multi-agency event. Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office has been a key player from the beginning, including, as I said, rescuing the nephew. And the Hillsborough County Code Enforcement has been here helping us to secure and make sure that no other homes are involved. Bracken Engineering is involved. And that's where we are right now. And I failed to identify myself. I'm Hillsborough County Fire Chief Ron Rogers. And there's no D in Rogers. But if you would, R-O-G-E-R-S. And with that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Chief, any idea how much larger this sinkhole could get or where it lies exactly in the house?
Okay. Question is, how much larger do we think the hole can get? As those of you who know about sinkholes, especially sinkholes in Florida, that answer really is not something that's easy to come up with. They are, a lot of it just depends on what's going on way below us. The Florida essentially sits on a system of caverns that are filled with water to some degree, and as that water moves up and down, it erodes those caverns, and from time to time they collapse. So the question really is, what's down there and how much earth is it going to take to fill it? And that's what we're trying to gather with the equipment we brought in, and other experts will be brought in to help determine that.
How are you going to be able to go into for a recovery operation?
We're still trying to evaluate exactly what our options are. We don't know yet.
Any idea how long it might take to recover the inside?
That's going to depend on what we find with the other equipment. We're going to look at what our options are to access that. The problem that we have right now is we just don't know how stable the house itself is. So until we know that, we don't know what our options are. But we will know with our equipment. We're waiting on the data to be compiled right now, and hopefully we'll know that soon.
What is the prognosis of the victim? I mean, time is of the essence here.
Until we can actually determine where the victim is, I can't really answer that. We're going to do everything we can for Mr. Bush, but we have to make sure that we don't endanger other personnel and other people in the process. It doesn't help to compound the situation. I'm sorry?
What is it actually going to look like in there?
I haven't been in myself, but basically what I understand is it just looks like a large hole in the floor, and then when you look in the hole, the way sinkholes happen is essentially like an hourglass, an inverted hourglass, and so you have the floor that's over the top of the sinkhole, and then there's a large opening underneath that, and then there will be a cone, and then there's another cone that's below that. Right now something's plugging that, and we want to make sure that it doesn't collapse under us.
How much of a threat to the other houses is the sinkhole posed, the neighboring houses?
We don't really know yet.
Have there been problems in this neighborhood with sinkholes before?
I don't know. Do we know?
I don't.
We don't have any information on that right now. Sinkholes are very common in Florida.
Can you tell us what the engineering group is doing here?
The Bracken Engineering is it's a group that's on call with our urban search and rescue team. They help us in determining whether structures are stable. If they're not stable, they help us in determining how we can stabilize them for rescue. And that's what they're doing. They are part of our urban search and rescue team. They have deployed with us to 8 hurricanes over the last few years, many tornadoes and other types of collapses, parking garage collapses, the power plant collapse over in St. Petersburg. So they're part of our team. They're just a civilian component of it.
Chief, how big is the hole and is it getting any deeper?
Do we know the size? It's about 20 feet deep and about 20 feet wide.
The sinkholes are very common in Florida.
Yes, ma'am.
How is Hillsborough County as a whole, Brandon area, Sumter area?
I don't want to get into that's not my area of expertise. I just know from living here my entire life that sinkholes happen fairly regularly. Hillsborough County's not at the top. I know Hernando and that area up there has a much larger problem with it, but they are common in Hillsborough County as well.
You mentioned sophisticated equipment. Can you talk at all about what kind of equipment we're talking about?
Bill, you want to share with them? This is Bill Bracken. He's the president of Bracken Engineering.
The question was, what is the equipment and what is it being used for? The equipment that they are using is different than the equipment that was used last night. Last night we brought in some GPR, which is ground penetrating radar. That gives us an idea, it uses radio waves to give us an idea of the conditions of the soils and their stability. The equipment that is being set up and actually has been set up and is receiving data as we speak is more of a deeper radio wave. We run it in 2 dimensions so as to ultimately get a 3-dimensional picture of how deep this goes and how far the instability of the soils extends.
What would you say to the people in this neighborhood? What should they be thinking? What should they be doing?
We're not going to leave until we know that this community is safe and we know the extent of this issue here. And we're going to make sure that everybody's safe, that, as much as we can. Obviously, we don't know where the next sinkhole is going to open, but with this issue here, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that the people are safe before we leave.
So the question is with respect to the end of the driveway. At this point, I would not suspect that to be part of what we're seeing. The instability of the soils extends towards the front of the house at this point. The hole has actually taken up most of the inside of the house, but we wouldn't be standing here if this were unsafe.
And the second question, earlier reports that we received were that the sinkhole was 100 feet wide and 50 feet deep, and now you're saying it is.
No, actually what is 100 feet wide is the safety zone. The hole itself is 20 to 30 feet in diameter. It's completely contained within the footprint of the house. And the depth is, at last we saw 20 feet, although we know it's been increasing.
30 feet wide, 20 feet deep.
Is the open hole.
The whole,
The safety zone around it extends 100 feet.
So none of it's visible outside the house?
Not at this point, no.
so how far inside the house does the sinkhole extend? How far beyond that bedroom?
Well beyond that bedroom. It takes up most of the inside of that house at this point, the open hole, that is.
It started from the bedroom and expanded to the...
Yes, ma'am. It started in the bedroom and has been expanding outward and is taking the house with it as it opens up. Yeah, I apologize. I should have repeated that question. It was asked a second ago. So the open hole is about 30 feet in diameter and is completely contained within the side of the house, and it's about 20 feet deep. The 100 feet is a safety zone that has been established around that because the soils around that open hole have been disturbed. And that is what this equipment is determining is the full extent of that area that's been disturbed.
Somewhere in that margin between the edge where it is now and another 20 or so feet in each direction, or where you think potentially more could happen until you test it in our show.
That's the area that we certainly don't want anybody in. That's correct.
Can you go through the timeline and how critical it is that you work in any particular fashion fast?
Well, obviously, time is a critical thing here with any rescue. So the sooner we can locate the victim and determine his status, the better. And that's what we're working towards. I'm going to have to cut it off. I'll take 2 more questions.
Prevent the whole house from sinking in?
We don't know, and really the house isn't the concern. The victim is the concern.
The neighbors on both sides, were they
evacuated?
They were evacuated. The Red Cross is assisting us in sheltering the families, with the Bush family and the other families on each side.
What's currently taking place on the other side of the table? What are we seeing going on with all those water?
As I said earlier, we're assessing, trying to determine the extent of the hole and trying to determine what efforts we can make.
Were there any other problems about sinkholes before here or any complaints about it?
We don't know.
His brother remains missing. Fire officials say first responders have been unable to make contact with the victim because of continuing danger. The neighbors on both sides of the house have been evacuated. The sinkhole is inside the house under 2 bedrooms.
The open hole is about 30 feet in diameter and is completely contained within the side of the house, and it's about 20 feet deep. The 100 feet is a safety zone that has been established around that because the soils around that open hole have been disturbed.
The instability of the scene is hampering rescue efforts. Officials are bringing more equipment to the scene that began around 11:30 p.m. last night. A massive sinkhole swallows several buildings in China, one at a time. First, the sinkhole collapsed a 3-story building, and then later that night, it devoured yet another large building. Fortunately, no one was injured in either collapse, and workers have now filled in the large hole. More than 300 people remain evacuated from the area as workers secure the site. For NBCNews.com, I'm Dara Brown. Coal, estimated to be the size of 4 football fields, opens up the ground in Ohio. The massive hole has eaten away at part of a state highway. It will have to be closed for months while engineers figure out how best to repair it. A pond near the sinkhole collapsed and created the massive dent in the earth. The Department of Transportation thinks that nearby dredging by an asphalt company may have led to the collapse. It happened so quickly, employees had to run down the road to warn traffic the road had caved in. Up in a Florida neighborhood and forced at least one family to move out is threatening more homes this morning. NBC's Carrie Sanders is in Windermere, Florida, with more on this story. Hey, Carrie, good morning.
Well, good morning, and sinkholes are not that rare because they dot the central Florida landscape, but this one is a little bit different because it appears to still be growing. Now, we don't know how deep it is, so I've set up a little experiment here. We've got a weight, and we've measured the rope out every 6 feet. So as I toss this out of the water, take a look at what was and what is. What is now a giant hole in the ground was just a few days ago a backyard playground where sandhill cranes paraded in the afternoon sun, a spot of serenity that disappeared when the earth began to swallow the yard.
There's a gigantic hole in my backyard.
In that first call to 911, resident Lou Lambros went from incredulous curiosity to full-on emergency evacuation.
Everybody out of the house. Come on, everybody out of the house.
Denise Lambros was the first to realize something was wrong as the hole took down 4 30-foot tall oak trees.
He woke me up and said, "Lou, there's a hole in the backyard," and I told her it's probably a warthog. I don't know why I said warthog, but
I said, no, there is a hole.
she was shaking. And then when I saw her shaking and the panic in her face, we both ran downstairs, and as we ran down, it was collapsing. The ground was collapsing into itself.
The family evacuated and emptied their home just in case the sinkhole continues to grow, which is a very legitimate concern.
Police said it was 1,500 feet across and 200 feet deep.
In 1981, in nearby Winter Park, Florida, a sinkhole swallowed a car dealership, a public swimming pool, and a portion of the roadway, all in a single day. Geologists say these surprise openings are created when Florida's sandy soil on top of clay, which is all supported on a deep earth layer of limestone, faces a sudden and violent collapse. The catastrophic event is often a result of a dramatic shift in Florida's unique underground rivers. In this case, experts say one of those rivers likely started to dry up because of this year's record drought.
If you lower that water level, then all of a sudden you leave space where the ground on top can actually sink down into it, hence the sinkholes.
So there is such a thing as sinkhole insurance, but it's not really a popular thing to people to buy. It's not mandatory. Now, we've measured it, and I pulled this back out. It's about
30 feet deep. That assumes that our weight didn't actually hit one of the trees that was sucked down into the earth. And yes, Ann, as you saw at the bottom here, because this happened this weekend, this is a Cinco de Mayo.
Gary Sanders giving us
sinkhole in your backyard. It happened to one family of 6 in Florida who were forced to evacuate when a 100-foot sinkhole came within a few feet of their back door. Luckily, they escaped. Lou and Denise Lambros and 2 of their children joined us this morning from Windermere, Florida. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Lou, it's a terrifying picture to see that hole so close to your home. What's it like for you to see that and realize that your kids played in that backyard?
You know, we're a couple days removed from when it happened. Just coming back here is it's almost frightening for me. It's just because, like you said, I know that my kids played back there. But, you know, we feel truly blessed because we believe God spared us from a tragedy. You can look at it as a, you know, natural disaster, but I call it a natural blessing because, you know, I'm thankful. I have all my children. The neighborhood kids used to come over here and play. And, you know, I just feel totally blessed that, you know, nothing worse happened.
Well, it's a great attitude to have, and I'm wondering, has it grown any since it was first discovered?
From the original point, when we originally came down in the morning, it has grown tremendously. Try not to look directly at it too much, but you know, it just from images I've seen on TV, it has grown from what I've seen. Now, I don't know if it's grown recently. It's hard to tell.
It's estimated to be about 50 feet deep, 100 feet wide, as we said. Denise, I understand you discovered it. How did you come upon it? How did you realize what was happening in your backyard?
Well, I just went to take the dog out to go to the bathroom, and that's what I went to the door and saw just the earth open huge and just huge chunks of dirt falling in. I witnessed a tree slide down into it, and it took me actually a minute just to stand there to realize what I was actually seeing.
You could actually hear this happening as well?
I did. Actually, I did hear something unusual when I first got up, but I thought it was my daughter downstairs maybe slamming a door, but just kind of little booms, little shuffling noises, but it got a little louder as I was going down with the dog, and that's when I discovered it, and it was unreal.
And then you go tell Lou, and Lou, you're probably not quite believing or comprehending what she's telling you.
She came up, I was still in bed. In fact,
If there's a blue pill and a red pill, and the blue pill is half the price of the red pill and works just as well, why not pay half price?